Not sure you would be able to follow me much further onto the frontier, little darkling. But the tranquility is well worth it if you have the skills to survive. You've been very attentive, letting me jaw at you for so long. But local tribes don't appreciate the gumption, and you will have to respectfully learn their nuances and ways. Something I have been thinking on is how weird my social situation is as a gangrel. Having a preference and love for nature is obviously what distinguished me onto this clan, but that is why my primal side is also so strong. The longer I survive, the greater the strength of the beast within becomes and affirms that preference for the wilderness. Though I am distant enough to no longer have a genuine interest in civilization, I am still quite a social creature. I am just selective over the humans I wish to associate and have discourse with. People and creatures with more honest hearts. I'm trekking back to Zion Canyon and into Utah. I often help the various tribes while I'm out there, helping them hunt, gather resources and provisions, supplying them with medicine, sticks and munitions, trying to convince them not to relent to living on reservations. They think I am some sort of spirit that lives in the caves. The only reason I can do this is because I still have a lot of my humanity left in me. So you could say I'm at this precarious middle ground at the moment. Some of the elders of the clan I found living out here are feral. They are complete social pariahs. They are part of the wilderness, while I prefer just to unlive in it. Shows you that although we are immortal and static in our undead state, we still change over time. With Gangrel, physically, but with all of us, psychologically. Kindred, you've caught me in the middle of preparing the ritual of wake with evening's freshness. As I said, dangerous country. Did you feel my vitae surge as my head tilted back? The power of the ancient blood ritual. Did you hear the thunderclap? Only known to a few odd kindred now, such old land knowledge will be lost and forgotten, with all such tribes having been massacred by the bluecoats. I have a notion that what you've been thinking of is weighed heavy on my mind as well. Been pondering it myself. What was that being that I encountered in the mine shaft? Its bat-like features were abhorrent. Stuff of nightmares. Must have been creeping around town overnight, feeding on the blood of those that slumber with an elongated tongue. It wouldn't surprise me if it had opposable toes and could hang upside down. Through animalism, I can think like any animal that ever was. Invoke their spirits to give me power in the hunt like the natives used to do in their cave paintings and carvings on stone. But I cannot get my head around that creature. So alien were its thoughts. The screech. It could echolocate. The noise emanating deep from within. It must have been able to see in pitch darkness. You didn't see the bodies. The bodies. I witnessed it smearing decaying blood from corpses onto itself, like some sort of grisly scent marking. I was absolutely petrified when I was in there. I think a lot of that fear was supernaturally bolstered by its tremendous presence, and the darkness around us seemed thicker, darker than it should have been. But I think the most unnerving thing of all is that in my peripheral vision its shadow seemed to move of its own accord when it shouldn't, and animate trying to grab at my shadow out of the corner of its eye. Yes, this world can be frightening, but you must combat that fear with knowledge and understanding. And so, I have been doing some research. I had to tread deep into Sabbat territory to get it. Had to talk to the sect members with less zeal, shall we say. Can't say the Sabbat has my well-being in mind per se, outside of potential recruitment, but I managed to converse with the more interested members in scholarly-based pursuits. But I do have to acknowledge how much knowledge the Sabbat did have in comparison. Maybe there is something more to these paths they follow. Speaking to the elder in the mine shaft, a lot was incomprehensible to me, but a few key words I've been able to interpret I've started to put the pieces together. It called itself 𝚂𝚘𝚘𝚗𝚘. 𝚂𝚘𝚘𝚗𝚘 was a bat-like god worshipped in the Mayan religion. I've also heard Camazos referred to as werebats by some Sabbat scouts, although I actually believe it to be a very powerful kindred, albeit with animal aspects being the core truth. Many kindred adopt bats' forms with Protean, but it is unknown why. It hasn't stopped the more curious of our kind speculating, though. Perhaps they kept flocks of bats, animals of the order Chiroptera, around them because they were such useful good companions for the clan's founders, owing to their legendary stealth and swiftness. Indeed, you do not see, but after I left I saw it leave the mine itself, taking flight as a giant, monstrous Chiropteran form, a powerful ability that is often associated with the highest use of the Protean discipline. It summoned me with the power of its blood into that mineshaft, like a call from an ancient ancestor. With my gangrel senses, I could smell the potency of its vitae. It smelled strong yet familiar, and it called me Childer. So it knew what I was. It talked of the ancestry, confirmed that its forefathers were Methuselahs. So, that creature must have been descended from the 4th and 5th generations. So it must have been only 6 generations away from the source. Which is incredible and terrifying. It mentions the divine gods. You see, around 250 AD, the beginning of the classic period of Mayan civilization began. Classic period rule was centered around the concept of the divine king, who acted as a mediator between the mortals and the supernatural realm. I believe that these beings were those divine kings, demanding mass human sacrifice to satiate their thirst. You can only imagine hundreds of slaves being dragged countless miles by warriors and servants of the kindred to their ceremonial altars to feed their insatiable bloodlust, as they slowly bled the population and surrounding jungles to death. Obviously, when in its presence, I had to go along with it, because it could probably kill me with a backhand. I don't actually believe they were gods today. I think they've been in the jungle too long. They're not gods, they're kindred. Just very old, very powerful kindred. I mean, how do we know that most, if not all, of God's in mortal religion were just kindred pretending to be deities, manipulating humanity? There have always been half-cryptid myths in kindred circles about the lost legacies of South America. Similar to the Laban of Africa, they are believed by some to be bloodlines of variants, while others believe them to be a phenomenon similar to the Kindred of the East. Now, the early Sabbat, conquistadors and conquests into South America encountered entities, which they classified as ancient vampires, Methuselahs, but that did not fit any established clans, and they sent word to Europe for reinforcements. They encountered heavy confrontation to Sabbat control from the Aztec worshipped being known as 𝚕𝚎𝚌,
rumoured to be hideously desiccated and corpse-like. So the rumours is that he was a survivor of the extinct clan of Death. But they can't know that. It could be some ancient that developed a form of necromancy. If it was part of the clan of Death, perhaps that explains the plague that swept through the civilizations. But more relevant, perhaps, is that they could never discover its location, for instead it relied on a network of spies and servants known collectively as 𝚂𝚘𝚘𝚗𝚝, being known as 𝚂𝚑𝚊𝚍𝚘𝚠, harassed the Sabbat for several centuries before he was apparently destroyed in 1691. The Tremere under Goratrix took credit for the act, but no one proved able to verify that claim. So one of the first Sabbat in the New World, Valasco, if I recall, classified it as an ancient 𝚕𝚢𝚌, for it had command over shadow that they call obtenebration, being able to create solid objects from darkness and using a shadow-like proboscis to feed itself from subjects. But these beings could have developed powers over darkness all on their own. They are not 𝚕𝚢𝚌. Now, according to sources by Sabbat scholars, the Aztecs gathered around an individual, a blood-drinking being that called itself 𝚂𝚑𝚊𝚍𝚘𝚗. Please forgive me, my brethren, if I'm butchering the pronunciations. And it had a hand in developing the Olmecs, and the oldest of Mesoamerican civilization, whose influence spanned over Mexico and the surrounding lands. His exact nature and origins are difficult to pin down, and even his true name remains unknown, as 𝚂𝚑𝚊𝚍𝚘𝚗 is merely a domination created by his servants in the New World that have identified him with the Aztec god of war. So, could this be the same being, rumoured to be of the clan of Death and using the 𝚂𝚘𝚘𝚗𝚝? Can't be, because apparently this thing looked like a demon. But there is also a demon-like legend of a being in ancient Kindred history associated with the name Nurgle, who was the bringer of plague. Could it be that the Spanish and the Sabbat conquistadors found some artifact or some other thing that should have never been unearthed? Could it be that the Black Rider that I encountered in the area was in that area for that reason, looking for things left behind by these powerful ancient ones? All this fits together somehow, I'm sure of it, but the truth is obscured by the fog of time and superstition. Right, so the Mayans also worshipped a being known as 𝚒𝚑𝚊𝚍𝚘𝚗𝚝. 𝚒𝚑𝚊𝚍𝚘𝚗𝚝, the Mayan god of death. The Mayan priests practiced a primitive form of blood magic, which they learned and enhanced. This was all recorded in a book or journal of the said being, known as the Codex of the Damned. The records of all the details of its formatological research, eventually kept by the Snattel priests, The records of details of all its mythological research, eventually kept by the 𝚂𝚘𝚠 priests in an attempt to make themselves immortal like their god, and coveted the secrets that were contained within. With the priest dead, the copy was passed from owner to owner until it eventually appeared in Zurich during the Renaissance. Other copies have been made, but apparently the copies have changed many of the secrets held within. No one really knows who first cracked the codex. Some say the Tremere in a council of 7 managed the feat, though there are thought to only be 2 translated copies in existence, one in Latin, thought to rest in the protective hands of Clan Tremere in Vienna, the other in English, which has apparently vanished from Kindred eyes. The codex indicated that this 𝚂𝚘𝚠𝚗𝚡, the Wanderer, was an ancient gangrel. Now we're getting somewhere. He could be the ancestor of the being I encountered in the mineshaft, this 𝚂𝚘𝚠𝚗. This would explain its powers and abilities, and the ability to adopt animal forms and command them, and also the use of protein. There is one tribe, or bloodline of South America, and although thought now extinct, is widely more known to educated circles, the 𝚂𝚘𝚘𝚗. When European kindred arrived in Mexico, the 𝚂𝚘𝚘𝚗, they found them openly ruling over the Aztecs, Inca and other civilizations as bloodthirsty gods demanding mass human sacrifices. They practice tribal forms of blood sorcery and have been seen to transform into jaguar. They have an enmity with both the Camarilla and the Sabbat, reaching back to the time of Christopher Columbus, when the European kindred came over to South America and almost wiped out their mortal civilizations. They had been, which I find strange, and in my opinion mistakenly, but classified as a bloodline of the Setites, the kindred of Egypt, due to their aversion to bright lights. I honestly think this is a ignorant response, just identifying the weakness of this bloodline and associating it with a problem that the followers of Set share. Ridiculous. They obviously have protein. I would speculate that they are an ancient gangrel line that took to Amazonia and beyond, that their sensitivity to light is something that they became afflicted with over time. Indeed, while most of us can venture out as soon as the sun dips below the horizon, the 𝚂𝚘𝚠𝚗 creature only crept out under black and cold of night, a true nocturnal. Indeed, the elder I encountered in the mine was painfully affected by the lantern light, but eventually seemed to adjust. With aspects of Bath, it doesn't surprise me at all that they would develop more severe affliction to the sun or light intolerance. I think when you get kindred of such low generation, the distinction between clan characteristics gets blurry. There is a contradicting theory to this argument. There is also a theory that the animal features are not always inherited by the gangrel clan, but by the use of animalism by other kindred. The higher tier ability of the discipline is known as subsume the spirit, in which kindred will push part of their own conscience into the animal and direct control of it. fascinating ability. When the consciousness is transferred back to the kindred in question, it is often what it can be left with animal-like behaviours and urges from the consciousness melding and passing back and forth.
Still one of the most popular recreational pastimes of the upper classes, social elite. Despicable sport by all accounts. At least none of the high clans or upper caste kindred can participate, for most of these hunts take place during the early morning and into midday. Even if they did try and participate in some sort of night hunt, they would have a different kind of bloodhound, like myself, to deal with. Not that most of them could ride horses or keep dogs and pets without them running away terrified, with their lack of animalism or ken for such things. I find myself pacing when I'm stressed or hungry. Blood is a post-mortem need for all of us, made into an instinctive urge, it seems, by our beast within. But my atavistic urges almost put me over it to the point of blackout into frenzy. What do the other clans know how to deal with a fully rampaging beast within? Help yourself. I think that our clan, seeing as it is often seen as base and destitute in their eyes, in the high clan's eyes, manners help us retain that touch of dignity, a way of reassuring me that I remain human, in sensibilities at least, despite all of it. I formed one. My mortal family were prosperous merchants, so I sat somewhere in the middle, not at the top of the social ladder, but not down in the muck. Enough money to avoid desperate living, but not enough wealth to turn into a wastrel fop like the aristocracy. But all that standing is long gone now. I will not take on retainers, human ghouls, or herds of mortals, not because I find a lot of such nuances in discourse distasteful, but because I travel too much, and I have not settled in any one territory. So to feed, I am always putting myself in risky situations and in settlements. And life for me is unpredictable without the blessed boon of stability that other masters of the night ambitiously seek. Are you ready to travel, Darkwalker? What were we talking on earlier? Ah, yes, how the discipline of animalism can alter the behaviour and appearance, physical marks of a kindred. But where does this animalism come from? With the Summaries so distant away in their Carthaginian mountains, I'm sure it is more of a practical, pragmatic manner. They use it because they need to control the wild creatures around them. But for the Ravenos, just due to their nomadic, vagabond lifestyle similar to us. Another observation that gives credibility to this theory is the rat-like features that I've seen on a few Nosferatu. They indeed have the animalism discipline and spend a lot of time around the genus Rattus. Just like the gangrel, Nosferatu are close to that beast within. Some could even say that they are distorted and warped by it. Probably, but no one really knows what causes their horrific curse of deformity. But the gangrel and Nosferatu, or specifically the gangrel, we develop physical arcs. We are a different breed. We gangrel so close to that beast within. We activate a form of not natural selection, Mr. Darwin, but supernatural selection. But where does this stem? Where does this come from? This animalism. Obviously, this must come from the beast within us, or it riles up within us. That the other clans have drifted away from and ignored. So, does that mean that the beast is natural? Part of what we are, not some entity or demonic possession, the beliefs of the Dark Ages. There are problems with the belief that the 𝚂𝚊𝚍𝚘𝚗 are a Setite bloodline. Issues with the facts that just don't add up for me. Firstly, with their use of the Prothean discipline to transform into animal forms, observed transforming into jaguar in the jungle, for example. Scholars have argued that this is an alteration of their original discipline of Serpentis, giving the Kindred of Egypt snake-like features and abilities. But, some argue, why would they relinquish or bastardize the powers of Set bestowed upon them unless they were outcasts? Not to mention how difficult to nigh impossible it would have been for those ancient kindred to have crossed the Atlantic. Indeed, I can see how some ancient kindred may have crossed over from Far Eastern Russia to the Yukon, across the frozen Bering Strait. But Africa, all the way to Mesoamerica? How would they have gotten all the way over there? And why? The idea that Serpentis and Protean are interchangeable disciplines to explain their theory is something I am sceptical on. If anything, and clan bias aside, I assure you, it is that Serpentis knowledge could have originated in the early forms of Protean, of ancient African kindred. Indeed, there are elder gangrel roaming the Dark Continent with reptilian features. Yet they stay well clear of involvement with the followers of Set. This could all be a moot point, of course. Whilst we are undeniably the top of the food chain, alpha predators, we aren't untouchable. We are not the only creatures to defy most explanation in the night. Most kindred have heard rumours of wares and other hostile creatures. Some have even had personal encounters with other things dark and curious. The savage and isolated jungles may hold many secrets, but the unexplained kindred have heard rumours of wares and other hostile creatures. Some have even had personal encounters with other things dark and curious. Savage, isolated jungles hold many secrets, as well as the unexplored vast open deserts and plains. And while many may laugh at these stories of monsters and strange creatures, wiser night walkers, such as we, know better. After all, we are considered to be myth by the world at large.
My hunger almost makes me wish that I hadn't have spared Tanner at the Moonshine Saloon. I mean, I've taken down plenty of worse unsavoury sorts. People that used to cut up people's gizzards and gnaw at their entrails just for fun. So taking down some peddler of moonshine wouldn't have been too much skin off my nose. But something tells me that he could have given me a run for my money. Well, speaking of money, I turned down a mucho amount of dinero for that one. But the only decent bounties being offered nowadays are with the Union, and that's only taking down defectors and such. I didn't get involved in the politics with my own kind, so I'm not going to get involved in mortal ones.
What did you expect, a coffin? Try and get some rest, Kindred. Although I'm naturally reluctant to say so, I think I could consider you a friend. And that's saying something, partner. Trusted travelling companion. We'll hold up here for a spell. Slumber and remain inactive. When the deserts are so vast, pickings are slim. Gotta conserve as much vitae as you can, especially when you're a fussy eater like me. What's your question? How bad was that frenzy that left me with these feral claws on my hands? Barely remember it. Such is the case with our blackouts when the beast takes hold. I woke up in a cave covered in gore after a feeding frenzy with a pack of coyotes. Them and my beast must have enjoyed quite the feast at that nightly gathering of predators. Memorable moment to send you off. Can't possibly go over everything, Kindred. My chronicle of the Western States spans a lot of years. I guess, on the opposite side, contrast to the events connecting me to my beast, one stands out as humanity trying to reconnect with me. You see, I've been taking on a lot of bounties from local authorities. Just good work, taking out some of the scumbags out there, and a man's gotta eat. Guess I've made an impression. Bit worrying for us, our lives don't bear a lot of scrutiny. The Nevada Desert Rangers managed to track me along the trail. bit disconcerting at first, but said if I ever needed them to send up a signal and they'd come running, that I wasn't alone out here. But I thought, I'm Kindred. I'm always alone. This was about the time I bumped into the Chupacabra of my own clan, my feral cousins, others of the bestia sanguinum. We will wait out the day here, and then drift on, fellow kindred of the Mojave.
There are 13 major clans that claim descent from founders believed to be members of the third generation. And whilst most kindred belong to one of these clans at their root, not all do. Nor does distinct identity in the form of blood-borne aptitudes and vulnerability depend on a known founder of these alleged grandchilder of the source. In short, breeding begets oddity. Illicit embraces, far removed from social clan norms, coupled with arcane rituals and manipulation, or just, as I suspect with myself, a very unique and specific manner of their embrace, have resulted in strange, distinctive bloodlines. These misbegotten, in turn, pass their new traits on to their new childer, and the distinctions can become far stronger or cemented with each new generation. Such is the fascinating mutability of the immortal blood. Caitiff are often labelled as merely abandoned childer of pre-existing clans, a label given to those not knowing of their clan lineage or origins. I suppose I would have been classed as caitiff myself, orphaned in the early years after my embrace. But of course, my clan characteristics manifested. Unlike others, mine become readily apparent in me, and I was identified as Gangrel the moment I encountered others of my kind in Europe. Something I have yet to talk on is how incredible these technological advances have been since my birth. A lot of these innovations were present when I was born in the 1830s, but since the mid-century they have changed the face of the entire world. When I was first working with my family in the merchant trade, it would take 3 weeks to almost a month to travel on a sail ship. Those sail ships were partial to blowing towards storms and were only capable of sailing during season. And I must say that my travels from the Dark Continent to South America, or at least Mesoamerica, being shipwrecked on Panama, and I must say that was not my fault whatsoever. I believe there was another kindred on board that would ravage half of the crew. Staying unnoticed aboard these ships was extremely perilous for kindred. The majority of us would have to enter a period of voluntary torpor in order to hide ourselves aboard the ships. And of course, go without saying that the confined crew quarters meant that I was often having to feign seasickness for days at a time. And my first venture out from the place I was in business in Tenerife and the Canary Isles failed miserably to cross from one port to another as I was cast overboard, as you well know. But I was not yet adjusted to dealing with the Kindred condition. But nowadays, sailboats have given way to steamships. Absolutely incredible. I love these original steam-powered locomotives. They were originally dirty and soot-filled, have transformed into these powerful behemoths capable of transporting hundreds of people in boxcars and cabins. And apparently Clan Venture even has their own private rail, the Midnight Express, allowing transcontinental rail journeys overnight. Sailboats have now given way to steamships. What would have taken arduous travel of 3 weeks to a month is now taking a week. A week! No longer are they tied to the privies of the winds, the seasonal change, the tides and the currents. They literally travel from one side of the Atlantic to the other. Some of these ships can now move from port to port before the time comes when Kindred even need to feed. Incredible how fast the world is changing. I assume though, while all these technological innovations are marvellous, I will slowly come to disdain them more and more. Already I do not need this new railway system, for my celerity is already so strong that I can outrun any mortal transport that has been invented. And I suppose as my capabilities as a kindred and as a dominant predator, supernatural creature increase, I will slowly come to disdain this technology as I need it less and less. For while these marvellous technologies and human exploit is indeed fascinating, it continues to pollute my world. And that is something that I cannot abide. They have even laid a transatlantic telegraph cable from England to America all the way across the Atlantic Ocean. I can barely believe such things that they have managed to do. I refer you to a passage written in 1872. Coincidence? That's when we first met. Written in 1872 by Hans Christian Andersen, which describes the impact the telegraph cable had on the sea creatures. Indeed, I met one of my kind out in Sabbat territory. I believed him to be of my clan. He talked of a great sea serpent, a colossal gargantuan sea eel that had expedited him from his home onto land. I believe they were actually talking of this massive telegraph cable that stretches over the Atlantic. And as soon as I heard of this passage, it immediately brought me back to the thing he said. I barely thought anything of it at the time, but now it has more significance. Could it be the myths of this bloodline are true? I will find out the truth, even if it takes me over a century to do so. Could it be these dwellers of the sea is why I feel the way I do.
Even though I felt empowered and invigorated like never before when I was cast overboard while sailing back to the Isles in my early years, I was lucky enough not to be far from land, for I am reluctant to dive into the vast dark unknown that is the ocean. But maybe it is due to a dark unknown within myself I have yet not faced. My humanity will not let me.
I wouldn't say this elder was a 𝚂𝚊𝚘𝚗𝚘𝚗. Probably more accurate to say that the 𝚂𝚊𝚘𝚘𝚗 are descended from him and his blood kin. 𝚂𝚘𝚘𝚗𝚘𝚗's elder told me that the blood kin had fallen, and yes, how far they must have fallen. Which brings me on to the speculation of why it brought me there. At first I thought it was talking about some sort of precious stone that had been stolen, but no. It mentioned Julius Stone by name. It knows of the Tremere with no small amount of discontent. The Tremere stole that codex. They must have stole the secrets of blood sorcery from them and any number of priceless artifacts. Destroyed and exterminated their entire race and civilization from afar. The Tremere must have searched these lost cities of the Amazon and the Incan ruins, looking to tap into the rituals of tribal sorceries. From the Tremere's perspective, upon their contacts and spies arriving in these distant shores, they discovered kindred that had been isolated for millennia and had developed a powerful form of blood sorcery all on their own. Well, how could they resist? Their curiosity, their greed, their lust for power. Although I could imagine with being so alien and unknown that they were clever and cautious enough to never confront them directly. They used the Spanish conquests, manipulating the mortals, having them burned out of their temples by day. Julian would definitely not ally himself with the Sabbat, tell you that for nothing. Probably manipulated both them and the Camarilla to get what he wanted. I won't deceive myself for a second into thinking the Elder summoned me there to help. I sincerely doubt it. It does not need my help, nor does it have my well-being in mind. More likely, it's that I'm being used as bait. It's tracking me, because Julian is also tracking me. Julian must seek vengeance against me for what happened in Munich. That thing knows it. How do I manage to get caught up in the middle of these machinations and plots between elders? I don't want anything to do with it. Just goes to show you, no matter how much of an outsider you are, and living on the fringes of kindred society, you still cannot escape the jihad and the dark tapestry that entraps all of us.